Hello everyone and welcome back to the Dumbass class where we are doing a little thing that's a little bit different to get ready for streaming Dark Heresy next week. I'm here with our GM and we're going to go over the story that's happened so far to get everyone up to date on kind of what's happened and what our GM has put us through basically. So Jay, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, my name's Jay. I'm the GM of the Dark Heresy campaign by the name of Man and Monster, where we're currently in Season 2, which is saying they've got their second assignment because this campaign has rather long missions. They're basically split up into several sub-missions. The players are of a relatively high level in the campaign. The system is Dark Heresy, as Diz already mentioned. And I think this is going to be a fun little thing to do. Make people aware of the bullshit I put you through and the stupidity you respond with.
Very much stupidity from some players. Others, not so much.
Well, considering the fact that, well, technically it's a bit of spoilers, but then again, this entire stream is sort of a giant spoiler, even though nobody else can watch these things. Yeah, I'm going to keep that for later in the stream, so it's better on it.
By all means, if you want to save some of the spoilers for a little bit later on, that is certainly your prerogative. Would you... How about explaining the start of our campaign and perhaps a little bit about who's been giving us our orders?
The man that's been giving the party their orders is an interrogator of the Ordo Xenos of the Inquisition by the name of Gregorius Nominus, who's a rather old fellow with several cybernetic implants, possibly a couple of rejuvenation treatments, that is decently well armed, and has written a very, very large book about gene stealer cults.
Yes, unfortunately for some of our players, they were carrying that book around with them for quite some time, or unfortunately.
Oh yeah, there's multiple copies of the book. Yeah. I mean, it's not just one book, he had it actually published, so...
And that thing
you still need to have it, yeah. That thing weighs quite a lot. Then again, it is quite a ridiculously heavy and thick tome that literally details just about every single detail that he knows on how to detect and eliminate gene stealer cults in all kinds of different scenarios. I mean, you haven't really looked at this in character, but there's even a section on the book that describes possible speculations on how gene stealers could infiltrate other Xenos races, so... as well as very intricate descriptions of all manner of tyrannid organisms if they're in relation to gene stealers. So there's not going to be stuff about Norn Queens and things in there, but like there's going to be stuff like Brood Lords in there. And about standard gene stealers and about the Patriarch and the different forms of hybrids, different forms of mutations they can have. Even some practical advice like what not to do when you meet a gene stealer. Like go in close combat, which is a very, very stupid idea.
Well, it's a very stupid idea if the God Emperor is not smiling down upon you, which we've been very, very lucky, and he appears to want us to do well.
Yeah, for the moment that's very much the case, yeah.
However, I will inform everyone that the first time we met Gene Stealers did not go so well. No, it went very, very, very badly.
The first time you actually met a gene stealer, several, that was very much the case with the what happened with the first time you met Gene Stealers was like, luckily the one you found was asleep, and you just got the hell out of the cavern that it was hiding in, called in reinforcements from your interrogator who was in orbit, and he had a drop pod with an Astartes sent down.
And we needed him. The party, honestly, I think we went in a bit too cocksure of ourselves, and yeah, we soon learnt that no, that's really, don't be overconfident.
Yeah, the entire reason because I heard that was partially a GM decision to just like, okay, Deus Ex Machina a Death Watch Astartes, because otherwise, yeah, I was otherwise very sure you people would have probably died, because you were talking about actually fighting the damn thing. You were not ready to take on a single one, I believe, and there was more than a single one down there.
Yes, our Astartes friend took out many foul gene stealers, and we just sat there pissing ourselves, which was scary
Yeah.
and funny at the same time.
It was reasonably interesting to watch, to just kind of see all your characters shit themselves while the Astartes is just chopping and shooting away at a couple of gene stealers. Just if the Astartes was not there, they'd probably kill you all in 3 turns.
Oh, without a doubt. That, although I thought we would do a lot better, it was a case of, no, our willpower wasn't even high enough to be able to... I think 2 of our characters were stuck, basically catatonic. My character, who was the command class, ran away, and I believe our tech priest also ran away.
Yeah, that was... stuff was weird.
So yeah, that Astartes definitely saved us, all of us, massively.
Yeah. It's a shame you guys never actually truly investigated on how he died, but I have a feeling all of you actually sort of knew how he died.
I think as players, we knew. I know my character's not very intelligent, so he kind of heard that an Astartes had been killed and was just like, oh, by the God Emperor, no. And that's pretty much as far as he got. I imagine our intelligence builds, they could probably put it together.
Yeah, but like out of character, like as the player itself.
Oh yes,
Because
as Magnus, I had no clue.
yeah, it's Magnus, but it's this. As this, who do you think killed the Astartes? Or what killed the Astartes?
I have a feeling it was the assassin who actually killed the Astartes, from the description of how he was killed.
Yep. I was indeed the assassin. Takes some very specialized equipment to just be able to headshot an Astartes and then have him actually die, so... yeah. Then again, let's actually go back to like the first question you gave us. Like, Gregorius Nominus gave you the mission. I think that when I first gave you that smallest mission that your characters were assigned to, sort of as a test, none of you really thought how deep the rabbit hole would go.
Oh, definitely. I don't think any of us had even the slightest clue what was going on in the start. I believe we were looking for a missing leader of the hive world that we were on.
That was not even the very start. The very start, you were assigned to essentially find out a person who sold particular statues that
Mm.
were misformed versions of saints.
Yes, that's right. I actually forgot about that.
That was how the entire thing started off. You found said person, intimidated him into telling him who he got them from, which led you to one of the first mainstay characters of the campaign, Alona Raikkonen.
Yes, Alona, a character that Magnus got to know a little bit too well, unfortunately.
Um, I wouldn't say actually too well because she was very secretive about herself. You got to learn. You got to know her very physically, but not so much mentally.
Yes, I think you're quite right there. She turned out to be a very, very sneaky person with many secrets.
Very many secrets, most of which heretical. The thing was, they were bad guys from the start. They were just not the kind of bad guys that were openly bad guys. But yeah, I think then in a meeting that what happened was when you showed her the statue that you found. Like the first hint that something was off about her, and that she very much immediately covered her tracks the moment she could, was the fact that the moment you showed her the statue, she just kind of took it out of your hands and just smashed it. She had no qualms about that. And then she immediately sort of diverted attention away from what she just did by offering you to, essentially to get you to the planet where these things were made.
Yeah, I know some of the other player characters, in character and out of character, did bring up how that was very, very odd of her. But at the same time, you did a good enough job convincing everyone that she just didn't want it around to, like, damage her family's reputation.
And that was most definitively also a real concern for her because she can't have her family's reputation be damaged. But yeah, like very big thing was she didn't know those things were being sold on her ship as well. Like she didn't know that, and the first thing she's like, okay, this is gonna draw suspicion to my house. Bam, gone. Because she wasn't actually aware of what the shipments exactly contained. She knew they contained statues of saints. Just there was a bit of a problem with the fact that apparently one of the craftsmen on the world that the statues came from had gone completely and utterly bonkers.
Yes, the old man was quite off his rocker, actually.
Yeah, because once you managed to get to the planet, you first had quite a bit of trouble finding out who the man was that has crafted these statues and where he was. To the point where you actually got a confrontation with the planet's elite PDF forces. Namely the Silver Guard. But I believe it was Surgeon Yanke's sort of like personal decision to be like, okay, we can't have any witnesses to what we're doing here. I'm going to try to shoot this guy, and then shot the guy on his shield with a las gun, and the shield turned out to be capable of deflecting las blasts. Then again, that was a bit of a theme with Yanke's character that he very much always would make sort of rash decisions, so...
Yes, Sergeant Kroon has been nothing but a hindrance, an ally, and just absolute gold in this game.
He's most definitely a bit of the odd one out of the party. Like, none of the characters you played were particularly normal, the way they acted, but Kroon was most definitively the odd one out, even amongst your group. Because most of your group was still relatively, like, cohesive, whereas Yank very much the entire time, like, from the start, he was a bit of a lone wolf.
Yes, I have to admit my character likes having allies that he can rely on. So I put in a bit of time trying to break the ice with Sergeant Kroon, and it just seemed to backfire constantly.
Yeah, yeah. Because he used that against you instead of, like, he used the fact that you wanted to become friends with him, wanted to include him. He used that very much against you, especially later on, which is again slightly spoiler territory. But yeah, so essentially after the fight with the Silver Guardsman, you guys will have to reveal yourself, which led to you guys being instantly informed, like, oh yeah, we've got a bit of an orc problem, and they've laid siege to an artisan workshop that this guy is currently in. And the guy is also very important to the planet. So they were immediately sort of like partially covertly, partially through rank, kind of shoved into the squad that was going to enter the workshop to clear out any greenskins that were threatening the artists themselves. And upon when you came in, a lot of the artists were already dead, but that particular one was not, because he was holed up in a room somewhere just talking to himself. And you guys had your first encounter with the orcs on the planet, which ended with differing results. Like, a couple of you went out completely unscathed, and I think Sarah took a flamethrower to the face.
Yes, I believe our sister, who was a scribe in a previous life, decided to charge in, and yeah, she got burnt to a crisp, but she did survive. So
She didn't die. She didn't die. She just well, she became quite the hothead.
very
But she
true.
cooled down quickly. She cooled down quickly. It was also the first time we actually got to see how overpowered astropaths actually can be, or at least how abusive of things like cover. Because that was when Dylan was still playing Merrin, and Merrin was Merrin was an interesting character that I didn't really fully approve of, because he was playing an astropath, and I don't ever limit my players on what they can play in, but we had so many discussions about what some of the rules about the astropath actually meant that we just, in the end, decided to just, okay, we're going to kill Merrin off, or at least remove him from the story for the time being, which comes later. But there also was a part with the fact where, like, with the unnatural senses, like, he could technically still see up to a different, like, a specific, in to a specific distance. And everything he could see, he could hit with Smite. Because Smite doesn't have to be a direct attack, it curves around corners. Oh boy. Oh bloody boy. That was... The orcs didn't even see where the lightning was coming from. They didn't particularly hurt them much because it was still very low powered, but that was just very interesting. And then there was also the fact that by the end of the fight, he immediately turned upon someone you guys thought it was your ally at that point. Because that was the moment during that fight you were introduced to Lieutenant Eric Skrill. Do you even remember Eric Skrill?
Yes, yes, I do. I actually really liked him. My character thought, yeah, he's a good person to have on board, and yeah, I had to apologise to the party because I was like, no, 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 he's a good person. And then he turned out not to be.
Yeah, Eric's crew was sort of like the first introduction into the fact that nobody really can be trusted on who they say they are. And he was the first obvious sign of that. Like, Alona had given some hints to that concept, but Eric's crew was like the first full-on embodiment of that concept that I gave you. Because he fought alongside you, but the moment you guys discovered he was a psyker, and he knew he was a psyker, or at least emitting some sort of psychic signal, he immediately tried to kill one of you. Specifically the one that was declaring he was a psyker. And he played that off then, and when he woke up after you captured him, he played it off as like afraid for his life that the man was gonna have him executed right there and then, and that he also kind of had the feeling that because the man started shouting that suddenly, that he thought the man had gone crazy or something. And I think Magnus believed it, but nobody else did.
Oh yeah, Magnus 100% believed it because he's a military man, and he was they were both military men, and he thought, oh, this is someone I can trust and someone.
Especially the fact because during the fight with the orcs, I think Eric's crew, I think it was he saved you, or at least one of your party from essentially the knob leading the charge.
Yes, I believe he did actually.
And because of that, I think you intrinsically like, okay, yeah, this guy saved my ass, I'm going to trust him.
Unfortunately, that's definitely something I'm going to rethink about my characters in future, but that's how I built Magnus, so I thought I need to stick to how Magnus would act. And yeah, I had to eat some humble pie after that.
Yeah, because what happened next was you found the man rambling, and he was brought to the hospital because, you guys discovered he was a latent psychic, hadn't actually developed any psychic powers or real control over it, but that something was messing with him because he was a psychic. So you brought him and your captive Eric Skrill to a hospital. And then then the hospital came under attack. Which is also one of those moments where we really see that Sergeant Kroon really was the team player, because Sergeant Kroon, while this attack was going on, was actually not inside the hospital with the rest of you. And that's also when we discovered a really interesting thing about Sister Sarah that had happened. Do you remember?
I believe that's where we found out that, or it took us a long time to figure out that Sister Sarah was a untouchable. Was that right?
Yeah, that was essentially that day. It had been slowly becoming more clear, but by the end of the day, it was very clear that whatever she had the sort of genetic code that would turn her into a null, but not born as a null. But that day, the genetic code finally just fully settled in and made her a null. And it took you guys quite a long time to actually realize, like, oh, so she's an anomaly in the warp. That's interesting, considering the fact that the party also contains an astropath.
It was one of those things where whenever Merrin brought up anything about the warp, it just went over Magnus's head and he didn't understand it. And it wasn't explained very well to Magnus, so it was like, okay, so what the hell is going on? So we kept walking around the hospital trying to figure out what the fuck was going on.
Yeah. I was quite curious. And that essentially, the fact that you weren't really paying attention essentially gave the ambushes enough time to set up and just launch a full attack on the hospital itself. Because while you were looking around for shit like that, nobody was paying attention to Eric's Krill. who managed to send out a message that he was in the hospital, so was the target, and that he needed a rescue.
But on the bright side, we did actually meet a really amazing guardsman, a silver guardsman.
Oh yeah, that silver guardsman was just amazing. Granted, they were very low level mooks, but he just helped out against like the constant assault of 3 men, just trying to get past him once into the hallway to flank you guys, and he just would not let them pass.
He was definitely an MVP of that combat.
He just put down his shield in front of him in that small corridor and just would not let them go past him. Whatever damage they did was not enough to get through his. They very often hit him in locations that his shield actually provided armor points to, and he also managed to block quite a lot of the attacks because he could block one of each, and then the other two would need to essentially take that opportunity to get damage through, and they couldn't because of the shield. And they were all so focused on him that they didn't realize that they probably, in the meantime, could have just flanked around the other side and reinforced their allies that were attacking the other side.
But
it was also the first time you got.
That would have been really bad for our group.
Yeah, it was also that fight was also the first time you got introduced to essentially the underlying threat that had existed, because you were for the first time introduced to the concept of gene-stealer hybrids.
I actually think that was the first time we were, well, for my character, 100%. He didn't even know they existed. Like gene stealers, hybrid, didn't know, had no clue about it.
Yeah, but you were very surprised by the fact that there were mutants in this attack, and that the mutants were apparently leading the attack as opposed to being used as grunts.
Oh, very much so. Yeah.
I think that was one of the things that Magnus used. Also, this is the moment that Eric Skrill died, because he immediately tried, like, during the attack, he tried to shoot one of you in the back of the head, but you noticed. He didn't live long to regret that mistake. I assume by your silence that I'm supposed to keep talking, so
Yeah, I've just realised that I didn't change the name of the stream, so it still says Nantucket.
Yeah, I know. I'm looking at that right now. So you change that real quick.
Yeah, that's done now.
Hasn't changed yet on my end, but so also the stream title is "Someone's Once a Man from Nantucket," and the game is now.
Enjoy.
Yeah, no, you need to refresh it for it to change. I've just refreshed mine, and
okay, chatting about a Dark Heresy game and a kind of reach chat. Okay, yeah. I think this was also the moment that you guys realized that the threat you were dealing with was perhaps a bit too difficult for you just alone to take on. Magnus even tried to call in reinforcements from over the entire planet, and for Magnus at that moment it was considered an unfortunate thing, but later when you look back at it, it's very much a fortunate thing, was that the communications around the hospital were jammed at that moment.
Without a doubt, that was probably one of the more brilliant things that you did.
That was one of the most rash decisions that I've ever seen a character take, because you went from being semi-covertly immediately to yeah, we're announcing we're Inquisition and we're gonna fucking destroy this planet if nobody listens to our orders. That was a sort of twist oh, whoa.
Yeah.
If that message had gotten out, then immediately you would have set a lot of things into motion.
Yeah, Magnus isn't the brightest, the sharpest tool in the shed, unfortunately. So his reaction then was, "Yeah, forget. No, we need everyone on board right now." And I'm quite glad that you were like, "Nope, communications aren't working."
Yep. So you managed to get back up to Ilona's ship, who was still in orbit, and essentially send out a message to the interrogator that shit's hit the fan, we need help. And then you were very fortunate Ilona, of all people, actually had a copy of the tome that was written by your interrogator on board a ship, which allowed you to derive that these were possibly G's cultists, which is why the interrogator even showed up. If that little piece of information had not been given, he would not have shown up. Again, just small details that very fundamentally changed the campaign. Because if you had not looked through her library to see if you could find any information on these creatures that she might have had, the interrogator wouldn't have shown up to help. He might have sent someone to help, but he wouldn't have come personally.
And I believe it was around this point that we actually lost Merrin, or was it a little bit later on?
That was later. That was when the interrogator was there.
Oh yes, actually, I remember now why.
Because the reason you guys lost Merrin was directly as a consequence to the interrogator. Because when the interrogator arrived, which was quite a while later, you'd essentially just been holed up in a lonely ship for I believe a month or something. Or at least for several weeks. You were, the planet you were on was along the Grand Processional, so warp travel was relatively favourable, so he managed to get there in relative time period, which most definitively helped. It was just long enough that essentially the people on the planet were, essentially the cult on the planet had forgotten about your existence, because it was like, okay, yeah, they're gone. They're not coming back either, I think. They had gotten what they came for, and that was it.
Yeah,
so
unfortunately, so Magnus has hatred for orcs, and our lovable Psyker had hatred of unsanctioned Psykers.
Yeah, he had a hatred for rogue Psykers. And both of those things sort of, your hatred for orcs almost got you guys into another conflict later down the line, but that was much later. Where it nearly decided, that was later in the campaign where you nearly decided to go fight orcs because you had hatred for them instead of actually continuing on with your mission objective. That almost ended badly. But yeah, when the interrogator arrived, he essentially gave you all a copy of the tome so that you would look at it, know about the adversary you were facing, and then immediately starting to essentially coordinating possible actions with the planetary government, as well as with Ilona herself. With Ilona insisting that she actually call for reinforcements from her house, which she managed to do. But you were sent back down to the planet to find possible sources of influence of the enemy cult, and you did. You found you managed to found a very upper class community of hunters that went all around the system to hunt exotic prey, to have been slightly influenced by the cult. And the thing about that little group was they essentially had come to worship the cult's patriarch and the woman that gave birth to the patriarch. To essentially they worship those two as gods. And the head of the organization was actually a former member of the cult directly, so he didn't worship them as gods, but he still very much did revere them. And he had essentially taken control of that group, because a while ago, that group actually, the Hunters Club, wasn't actually like their induction into the greater conspiracy was actually relatively. They were relatively young in that part. It was essentially when their new Grand Master had come in, had given them a lot of luck in the hunt, and explained to them that was because of a certain saint that he worshipped, who gave a particular blessing to the hunter, that they all started worshipping the hunter, and eventually became corrupted by the cult. None of them were directly converted or corrupted, though. They were all. None of them were part of the hive mind. The fact that even led you guys towards it was the fact that Merrin was able to deduce that there was some sort of psychic presence in the building, which was from the gene sealer that was slumbering below it. Otherwise, you guys would probably never even found the group, which would have meant that they would have shown up at the final fight in full force.
Which definitely would have been devastating, because that battle was not easy.
That battle was most definitively not easy. You guys got the jump on them, and they still managed to do quite a lot of damage. Also, if you had not killed them at that point, you would have been short on equipment, essentially. Because a lot of your higher level equipment you looted off that group.
Most of Magnus's equipment came from that group.
Yeah. But essentially they tasked you with some sort of initiation mission that was to take out a possible lower hive's piece of scum that was trying to pose competition. Because man is the most dangerous prey of all to some, they essentially said, he's your target. Kill this prey, he's lower hive scum, so he can be considered to be an animal regardless. Kill this piece of just meat, of things he can challenge us. After which after you'd found the particular person and their holdout, you quickly discovered that they'd actually sent you after your own interrogator.
Yes, that was quite embarrassing after Magnus took out at least one guard, and I think another guard got killed. And then it was like, no, Merrin. I think Merrin shot our interrogator with his bolts, didn't he?
He tried to. He tried to attack. He tried to attack your interrogator because your interrogator was not a psycho trained by the Astra Telepathica. He was sanctioned, but not in the same way that Merrin was. Merrin therefore considered your interrogator to be, well, in defiance of the edict of the Astra Telepathica, and therefore became very frustrated with your interrogator, and sort of just stormed off on his own. That's the point where you actually lost Merrin, because Merrin just walked off. He didn't pay attention to where he was walking off to, and therefore subconsciously was attracted to the largest hub of psychic activity on the planet, which was the headquarters of the cult. And they just let him pass without resistance until he essentially realized that he was standing before some sort of throne. And when he looked up at the person sitting on the throne, and the fact that there were all sort of monsters and weirdly mutated tech priests around, he he tried to send out a one last signal to Magnus. And you received that signal. You received sort of a vision of a very mechanical, but also very much biologically infested area with possibly corrupted tech priests around. It just was looking very nasty. It essentially gave you a clue like, okay, Merrin's probably dead. But we have a clue that possibly the Mechanicus are involved. Which let you guys to actually go find and seek out the Mechanicus, which introduced Dylan's new character, Felicia. And then you took Felicia to go take out the HQ of the Hunters Club, which again led you to call on the Astartes. The Astartes kicked ass. The Astartes actually got damaged as well during the fight because G's to the claws do a ridiculous amount of fucking damage. Which makes sense because in lore-wise those claws are able to penetrate Terminator armor without too much trouble, so...
But he didn't go down, he stayed standing, and bloody hell did he take out enough.
He took out enough until you essentially suggested to him to use one of his grenades to just blow up the fucking passageway the G-Seaters were coming through.
And probably something that I always felt like was just like really bad luck was that Felicia's first combat with the group, she got shot in the face and lost her eyesight, which was just like, oh man, that's so harsh. But I think that was when we were taking out the hunters.
Yeah, when you were fighting the hunters, Felicia lost her eyes. So when the Gene Stealer fight was commencing, she was seeing through her mechadendrite. No, actually, she wasn't there for the Gene Stealer fight. She was being taken back to the surface by Yenka.
Yes, I believe there was only 3 of us.
There were only 3 of you there for the actual fight with the Gene Stealers with the Astartes, because, again, I knew that some of your characters were just not up for the fight at that point. Yenka being one of them, just because he generally tries to avoid fights. And Felicia, because, well, she was quite significantly wounded.
And she has 25 willpower, which is extremely low. So any fear tests are quite dangerous for her.
Yeah, that was a very dangerous circumstance for her. But after you disposed of the whole Gene-Stealers were coming through, you all essentially went to go find your interrogator again, who was by then back on the planet's surface, essentially just having a meeting with most of the military commanders on the planet, which includes several Sororitas forces, several Mechanicus forces, the PDF and the PDF, and the elite PDF, the Silver Guard, and the Imperial Guard regiment stations on the planet. I think one of Ilona's men was there as well, but they didn't really do anything particularly noteworthy.
But we did find out that there was an infiltrator.
There was an infiltrator. Yeah, there was an officer of the Imperial Guard that had been working for the cult that tried to essentially covertly make his way out of the hall to go contact the cult about the fact that, okay, the Inquisition is here and they're informing the entire planet on how the fuck to kill us. We need to put a stop to this. But you put a stop to him before he could get the message fully out. And then you went on to interrogate him, which led to a very personal favorite interaction that I had between like the full interrogator, like not the interrogator like rank, but like his job was to interrogate people, and Sergeant Kroon.
Yeah, that
Because
was quite funny.
Sergeant Kroon insisted on seeing the man's face because the man wore a very large black hood and mask for quite specific reasons, namely the fact that the man was quite literally sort of a walking skeleton. And that face was quite scary because essentially just when what Yenka actually saw in that instance was in fact he saw a gilded silver skull with no eye sockets, but still sort of somehow staring back at him. And that was a fearful image that he could not, like, he just ran away, like, partially traumatized and immediately forgot what he'd actually seen because his brain did not want to remember that.
Yeah, I think the whole party had a good laugh about that.
Yeah. Out of character, everybody was like, "No, that's funny." And even he thought it was funny because he didn't expect something like that. Like, I didn't tell him what his character actually saw. I only told him that afterwards. And he was like, "Oh yeah, that makes sense. I ran away from that." Because the implication of that was that that man was actually not fully alive anymore. Which I'm glad none of you investigated that any further, because that would have gotten some complications with your interrogator.
I think Magnus was just under the assumption, look, this guy works for our interrogator. Let's not pry too much. Let's just let the man do his job.
Yeah.
He's clearly here for a reason.
This is also around the time that you got into conflict with a certain Corporal Jenkins.
Yes. So Magnus spoke to a Corporal Jenkins, and he didn't like what Corporal Jenkins said. So he tried to have him executed, because Magnus is a bit of a petulant noble at times.
Yeah, you were not given the authority to execute him. However, he did die later on, but not by your hands. Or any inquisitorial hands.
And we also found out that actually he was really important.
Yeah, he was quite the important field commander. And the entire reason he had not been promoted further was because higher ranks are supposed to stay away more from the field, which would nullify his tactical, influence. The man was an idiot when it came to strategic measures, but when it came to tactical endeavors, he was very, very erudite. He was just also a bit of dick. And that side of him that was a bit of dick did not go well with Magnus.
So out of character, I found that hilarious, but in character, Magnus was furious. It was quite funny.
The guy was really just like the embodiment sort of like a Leroy Jenkins, which is why like that was his sort of behavior, like extremely laid back but also very fierce at the same time. And that's also why I gave him the name Corporal Jenkins. Actually, I made his first name Leroy, but nobody asked about his first name. But yeah, he did not. I don't think either of you liked each other, but he was a good friend of the interrogator as well. So again, the interrogator with the black mask. Let's just refer to Gregorius by name now. That makes it easier for this section. He was not a friend of Gregorius personally, but he was a friend of the interrogator, which is also why the interrogator also, again, when you tried to approach him up, Jenkins gave him nothing but praise, which rubbed Magnus even more the wrong way. That everybody he talked to about getting rid of Jenkins was like, "No, but he's a good fellow." And they were like, "But I don't like him.
He spoke to me like an asshole. He must die."
Yeah. He insulted a noble.
How
Yeah,
dare he?
a noble who's now currently working for the Inquisition. Therefore, his ties to the Inquisition are more important to his ties to his family. And he's talking to a corporal of the Inquisitorial Stormtrooper Corps. As far as Jenkins was concerned, you were both about at the same rank. So he didn't give a shit about your apparent, like, self-righteousness that you were a higher rank than him.
Yeah, Magnus really didn't like that, but out of character, I was laughing so hard. That was really brilliant.
Yeah. And then, one of the more defining moments of the campaign happened. Sergeant Kroon got kidnapped.
Yes, our beloved Sergeant Kroon went missing, and I mean, Magnus was worried about him, and every couple of sessions, Magnus was trying to contact him, but yeah, we just didn't quite know what was going on.
Yeah. Out of character, we all knew why this was. This was because the player that played Sergeant Kroon couldn't play the game for a while, possibly even not anymore at all. So we decided to take out his character, and I brought in one of the more interesting characters that I actually had saved up for season 2. It's a bit of a wild card, and I brought him in, and I brought that character in season 1 to essentially take him out of the story. And that particular character was the assassin.
Oh, and she liked to toy with us.
She fully realized that you were no match for her, so she just played a game. When Gregorius himself got to your section of the ship, she became a bit more serious and actually tried to kill Gregorius, but well, sort of tried to kill. She didn't put too much effort in, but she tried to give enough of a deterrent that you wouldn't chase her any further, and just ran off.
Yes, she ran off and placed a few well-placed traps that, if that had hit one of us, I think Magnus would have been all right. But some of the characters, yeah, that would have been quite a damaging hit.
She essentially hung up some one-shot servo turrets with melter pistols attached to them, which would have been very, very dangerous for most of you.
And just a quick question: was that a bomb that was attached to it?
Not fully a bomb, but more like a mechanism to prevent. It was actually a shocking mechanism that was meant to prevent anyone but her from picking up the melter pistol again, because she wasn't just going to throw away the melter pistol. Initially, she was going to recover that. She just didn't have a chance afterwards. So, but the device that was on it was actually a device that was meant to electrocute you if you tried to take the melter pistol and you didn't have her signature.
Ah, okay. Because our tech priest saw that there was a box attached to it and couldn't identify it, and it was like, yeah, let's not touch that.
Yeah. But it's a good thing you did, because that thing does 5d10 unresisted energy damage.
I'm quite glad Magnus didn't pick it up now.
Yeah. But if it just rolled 5 once, you would have been fine, but then again, it had a damage potential of 5 to 50, so it was dangerous.
I mean, let's go with the middle of a 25. That I'm pretty sure that would have killed any one of us. Well, at least a fate point would have been burnt on that day.
Yeah, I imagine if it rolled very high, you guys probably would have been like, yeah, I'm not even going to burn a fate for that, because it's just... Well, maybe you would, but...
I think Magnus definitely would have burnt a fate point, but I would have I personally would have been like, yeah, Magnus is out of it for a while. He's not going to be... I'm going to sit back and basically Magnus is unconscious. Still breathing, but yeah. I'll sit out.
Yeah. Also, the device would have burned out after a single shock, so the next person would have been able to pick it up. Which was a sort of trade-off. You could have gotten a melter pistol at that point in the game, but none of you had expertise in melter weapons, and none of you wanted to risk potential death, so... And also, probably none of you would have known that the device would have burned out after a single shock, so... None of you would have been wanting to pick up the thing the second time either, most likely.
Unfortunately, our tech priest had some bad rolls on identifying it, and we were all like, yeah, nah. Not worth it. Let's just walk away.
You had enough out of character. You had enough of common sense to like, yeah, the GM's not just going to hand us a melter pistol. That box is probably going to do something very dangerous. Let's just not touch that.
Yeah, even Magnus in character, being a military man, he knows about booby traps. He's not intelligent to know enough to know what booby traps they are, but that's something he definitely would have done, given the situation. So he was like, yeah, no, if our tech priest can't identify it, I'm not touching it. But I think that was definitely a moment of a little bit of salt for our tech priest, being like, no, I have to leave this hallowed piece of technology and walk away from it.
Yep. And you went back down to the planet to now discover some things, because with the information from the records you'd found at the Gentleman's Hunters Club, as well as the vision and some of the information that you've gotten from Felicia being Mechanicus, as well as from the guy you've interrogated, you managed to sort of find out the direction in which to search for if you wanted to find an entrance to the base. Not the main entrance, take that, but an entrance. And you went on your way to find it. Which also, coincidentally, at the same point in time, Sister Attila had gone down to the planet to the order that of Sororitas that was on the planet, and just handed over a bunch of the crap she'd gotten from the fight with the Gentleman's Hunters Club, which luckily for her included an artifact that was stolen from them, that they were happy enough about having back that they were like, okay, you are a Sororitas, you brought us back this hallowed piece that is important to us, we'll give you permission to wear Sisters of Battle power armor. Which was quite interesting, because Sister Sarah was completely envious about that. Like, you bitch. I believe that was even said in character, that she actually just called Attila a bitch for that.
Yeah, I think she did. That was one of the highlights for me.
Just because one of the... however, she was not given the combat power pack that was normally also given to Sisters of Battle, so she only had like the 5-hour power pack, and otherwise she would have to walk around in it uncharged. Which still means she could move in it, but not very fast. Which led you to another complication because of that. When you went into the hive, you needed essentially a halfway point to stay at when you were going back.
And it was quite
You
funny.
ended up in...
For some weird reason, at this point, our group decided, yes, let's try and be a bit more subtle about this. Let's wear cloaks and let's hide ourselves. And so we've got 2 sisters with us. The one with power armor covered up, Magnus covered up. Our other sister decided not to, for some weird reason. When all the characters were like, yeah, we'll get bed sheets and cover up, we'll requisition robes, we'll do this. So yeah, she went down onto the planet in her normal sister sororitas robes.
Strangely enough, it does not deter some idiots from trying to rob you, which did not go well for them. Like, for real, the only thing they had was daggers, some swords, and a stubber against literally people that were walking around in power armor and had power swords. So they quickly ran away. But your halfway point of that, when you essentially decided, like, oh yeah, crap, it's late, and we still have to go back. And we probably don't have the we don't have the time to go back up to the surface again. So you decided to find a place to stay, which was in a small lower hive sort of motel sort of thingy, which was very fancy for its location, very well kept. And due to the fact that Magnus had no clue how pricey things are in the lower hive, massively overpaid by just throwing down some thrones instead of some gelds or something. And you were immediately, like, given, like, out of sheer gratitude and also sort of slightly out of fear, because that's the dude that just threw down a couple of thrones. He's probably very powerful. The fanciest room in the entire motel, which was normally reserved for what you guys then assumed was the daughter of the local crime lord at that point in time. Until afterwards, when she ordered the place to be burned down and there were gene-seeded cultists involved. Or more specifically, hybrids.
So, out of character for that, when we were walking down through the hive originally, you brought her up. You were like, "Oh, there's a very beautiful woman with armed guards walking along." And out of character, I knew immediately she is someone that we should note down. But in character, Magnus was just like, just another underhiver. Who cares? If only we had realised, or if only we had listened to our sister in power armor.
Or the fact that you actually read through and remembered the notes you had found in the Gentleman's Club, because they'd actually noted her as well. Back in the Gentleman's Club, there were notes pertaining to a woman called Ophelia Seville, who was the most blessed birth giver, as she was referred to.
See, I blame our intelligence builds for not bringing that up, because Magnus was getting drunk with the Astartes at that point.
Yeah, you were all so, like, entranced by the fact that it was literal Astartes fighting alongside, well, not alongside you, and more or less fighting for you, because you guys were too afraid to actually fight yourself, but...
Oh, 100%.
Very much
Magnus
that.
was just like, "Oh, Astartes, oh my god, here, what can I get you? What can I do for you, my lord?"
You ended up, like, bringing down several, like, just... I think at one point you guys decided to just bring down a keg to the Astartes because he was drinking so much.
I think we bought him several kegs in the end, and it was just like, just keep bringing him shit, keep getting him shit.
Yeah. Like, that's the only reason he even warmed up to you, because he was an ex-Space Wolf. If he had been from any other chapter before joining the Death Watch, he would have been a lot more cold to you. It was just the fact that you provided him with a good fight, and that you provided him with lots of alcohol, was like, okay, I'll talk to these regular humans. Then the fact that you were also Inquisitorial Acolyte, so he couldn't just slap you aside.
I think that's like the one time when Magnus has truly been, like, humble as all hell, just like, oh my god, I'm not worthy to be here. The God Emperor has truly blessed me to be in the presence of an Astartes.
Who then later got killed by just someone you didn't even know at that point yet.
Yeah, that was a sad
Oh,
day
well.
for Magnus.
Because when you got the news of the Astartes' death was before you actually met the assassin.
Yes, I believe it was.
Only like a day in-game time before you met her, but because you heard of the Astartes' death a day before Yankee got kidnapped, so. But yeah. Back to the motel scene where you essentially, she offered to be willing to stay with you in the room. And you were all acting very suspicious of her, which in turn made her. She was from the get-go very suspicious of you, but she was really good at hiding her emotions. And she was like, "Okay, well, you've paid good price for this room. I need to have a little talk with the owner downstairs." And she went down with her guards, told the owner to just fucking run, and then ordered her guards to set the place alight. Just burn you and every other occupant in this building alive. And burn the building down with it. And it's a good thing you overheard that, because otherwise she would have been in a very precarious situation.
I mean, that fight was probably the closest we had to multiple characters dying.
Yeah, because flamers are overpowered as hell in the system.
Yeah, definitely. I will put that, like, me as a player, I've always stood by the fact, if you're positive, RNGesus will bless you. And that's something I tried really hard to just be like, Magnus is going to be positive. He's going to stay trying to get the group to keep on the good thoughts. And somehow we did manage to kill everyone. We didn't lose anyone, and I don't think anyone had to burn any fate points, but it was close. Very close.
Yeah. Here's like a thing that I very much try to do always in my campaign. Most of the time, I try to keep the pressure on enough. I'm not going out of my way to kill player characters, but I do keep the pressure on so that it's not going too easy, that people lose interest in the game because the threat of death and the realism is low. The threat of death is ever lurking in this system.
Oh yeah, 100%. These D10, essentially in all the weapons basically do a D10, unless it's a primitive. And with that, there's a big gap for, oh no, you took no damage, to, oh yeah, you're fucked.
But yeah, it's even Warhammer Fantasy is even more lethal, which is why it restricts you so much in character creation, I think.
Yeah.
Like Dark Heresy gives you a bit more freedom to just make a bit more of a unique character. Also because the universe is there to make a bit more of a unique character as opposed to Warhammer Fantasy. But also, you're slightly more likely to survive. Just because of the fact that you can have better armor as well. But back to the actual campaign. You then made it back up to the surface, scared the shit out of the people that actually tried mocking you before, because they noticed you and immediately just ran the fuck away when you were going back up. Informed the interrogator that you had found an entrance, but then were also interjected by the fact that apparently the head of the patriarch of the Rogue Trader House of House Racone had just arrived. A certain Salvatore Racone, who had flown in on quite an impressive large vessel, and it apparently brought quite some elite infantry, as well as his head of his personal military with him. A certain Lord Verdare.
Yes, the guy who we all were immediately like, he sounds exactly like Darth Vader.
Yeah, completely black power armor. Helmet that completely obscures his face. Sword at his side, completely inlaid with ruby gems. And just very, very tall. That does sound like Vader. Yeah.
Especially with how he talked and how he was breathing.
Yeah. Very much that was very much a character inspired by Darth Vader, because I was like, I need to give this man, this rogue trader, I need to give him a sufficiently intimidating but also very obvious malevolent military leader. So who do I give him? Well, let's go with Darth Vader and modify him to work in a 40k setting. He doesn't have the same. He doesn't have the same cybernetics though. He doesn't have any cybernetics, as far as you guys are aware.
Well, we've never seen under the armor, so he could be cyberized to all hell. But until we see him out of that armor, and somehow I very much doubt we'll see him out of that armor now.
Yeah. So, you had a small, I hesitate to even call it a discussion, because he sort of he was very dismissive towards you. But after that, he essentially just, he was content with it. He left you guys to your own devices. And you requested a small squad of men to go down to the planet with, but not before Magnus, in particular, had a very interesting little talk with Salvatore and Alona.
Yes, that was quite interesting. So Magnus is actually from a knightly house on a Forge world. So if he wasn't in the Inquisition, he would be a very renowned character. You know, his family name would get him a lot of stuff, and I have used his name a few times in the campaign to get us like lodgings and stuff. And yeah, Jay did something that I wasn't expecting. So Magnus
what happened
ended
here
up
was
getting engaged, which was like, oh dear.
Because Salvatore Cone personally came up to you to give you his blessing. Which, out of character, also shocked you a bit as well. Like, in character, you were completely shocked, and out of character, you were like, oh boy. Oh dear.
Yeah.
Woo.
But I actually so after one of our sessions, I personally think it was the right thing to do. Was I basically said, yeah, my family would never allow it. They wouldn't go for it. It's not something they would do. And Jay used that information, which I personally think it makes the game more interesting to give the GM information to use against the players.
Well, not just to like debilitate you with, but to give you more interesting things to RP with.
Yeah, 100%.
This was very much one of those cases. But then you went down to the planet again, and you were also reunited with Sergeant Kroon back on the vessel before you went down, who had apparently returned with amnesia, no recollection of what had happened during his abduction, but otherwise completely unharmed. Which is where a lot of you, I think, already were like out of character, like sort of, okay, this is just essentially a Deus Ex Machina to get him back into the plot. But in character, like maybe some doubts. But what was really going on was like, I think you guys discovered sort of what was going on with Jaeger in the final fight of the season. And you were all instantly very suspicious of him. And especially when I allowed you to actually hear one of the personal conversations he'd been having.
Yeah, there was something that happened later which gave Magnus some reasons to be suspicious. But up until that point, for me as a player, I didn't want to look into it too much, because for one, we really wanted to see what was going on with the rest of the story, and the other part was that I didn't want to slow the game down by going into a million questions about what's going on. Go and get Gregorius, what's going on, have you interrogate. It was more of, let's just go with the flow and see where this leads us.
Yeah. Oh boy, you come to regret that.
Little bit, yeah, little bit.
Because as part of the arrangement I made with the player that playing Yanka, was that in character, he'd be given an offer to work for House Raccoon, and more specifically the assassin. And that was a deal he took. So when he came back into the game, he no longer was an ally to the other players. He was a possible adversary. He was going with his own goals, and for that moment, his goals aligned with that of with the other players. Namely, his goal was to protect Magnus so that the marriage could go through, which would be most favorable, and also to help them find out where there's genes to the cultists, because House Raccoon has certain things going on that require the corpses of gene stealers. Yeah. As I said, House Raccoon is very, very, very heretical. Not chaos heretical, but very heretical nonetheless.
Something we would find out later on, when there was very little we could do about it. But it was
that
definitely...
yeah, most definitively a season 2 thing that happened at the... I would consider we're still in the beginning, or maybe like the middle of season 2.
Yeah.
I think season 2 is... I think it's going to be a bit shorter than season 1. Because because season 2 was a lot more straightforward than season 1 was. Season 1 was like, I had so much time to plan stuff out, I had so many notes. The fact that Yanka had to first leave the story, then get back into the story, gave me so many new openings. And the fact that you guys RP'd very well, it was wonderful to just do season 1. And season 2 is a bit more, I have less openings to go into due to the situation itself. And that was a very conscious decision. But back to season 1, what we're talking about, you brought down some people down with you to the planet to where you discovered the entrance. You'd also discovered that pretty much in a 50 meter radius around you, just everything had died after your first night, which included some gene stealers and hybrids and cultists, which got you all very concerned as to who or what had killed all these things, while they were most presumably coming to kill you. After which I think it was Felicia that deduced that it was most probably the assassin that the others have been talking about.
Yes, I believe she examined some of the bodies and found a particular weapon had been used to dispatch them.
Yeah. And just the fact that so many had been slain and none of you had heard so much for it. Like, with the amount of corpses and stuff was there, like, the most one of you heard was the gunfire shots in the distance. And that was all you had heard. As opposed to, like, death screams and shit like that.
And I believe, I actually think Magnus was saying, when he got told about the gunshots, it's just the Underhive, it don't matter, no, they always kill each other. Probably shouldn't have listened to Magnus yet again.
But technically the gunshots that you heard were not the one of her. Her gunshots were not her, because her weapon was very, very high quality silencers. Essentially, she had like the stuff that really does silence a weapon. As in, she had those Deus Ex Machina devices installed to literally just stop all sound on her gun. Whereas the gunshots from the people that were coming to ambush you, they were not silenced. And those were the ones you heard, because they did try to fight back. They just didn't know what they were shooting at, and where the thing they were shooting at was. So, I had a sort of secret GM roll off to just with general rules to see how well each side would do, because there was a possibility the assassin could have died in that situation if she got outnumbered too badly, but they never spotted her. So the next day, you managed to get into the base, where it, for the first time, also became very evident that something was wrong with Sergeant Janker, because of the way that he just snuck around the base, dispatching guards in a way that none of you knew that he could. Because for all you knew, he did it with a sword, by stalking up behind his target and slicing their throat. What Felicia, however, found were the same sort of chemical compounds as in the poison that was found in the corpses of the gene stealers outside. And also the fact that she spotted a tiny little minuscule dart in one of the bodies. I think at that point Felicia just became instantly like, I don't trust Jank anymore. And she already didn't like Janker that much. And then you got into the base. The first area, relatively quickly done. The second area, you got news that Vidaire and a special squad of his have managed to also get into the base. None of you realizing how they actually found it. You met up with the Skitari that you had seen before at the meeting with the interrogator, who had also the Mechanicus had led their own special investigation to find out who the corrupted tech priests were, had purged the corrupted tech priests, reclaimed their cybernetics, and also gotten information on the location of the enemy base from them, and had decided to send in a small purging force led by a Skitari commander with several combat servitors, which aided you in your fight.
I believe one of us killed one of the servitors by accident, though.
Yeah, I think that was Janker.
Yeah, I believe it was.
Janker was like, I don't trust these things. He was just, I kill everything mode. That was also when you actually fought some gene stealers, but especially one of the combat servitors managed to just completely stole one of the gene stealers so you could kill it. That was an interesting area. The next area is where the part where you had having a hatred orcs almost got you into a very complicated situation. Because in the next area, you got into a huge cavern of systems where you saw gene stealers and their cultists and the hybrids fighting orcs. Because the orcs had, via underground tunnels, also managed to infiltrate the base. Well, not so much infiltrate, it's just attack the base. Because most of the orcs on the planet lived in underground tunnel systems, that had somehow crossed with that of the Genestealer base. And they'd been fighting in those tunnels for several weeks at that point, and that was just the point where, well, by GM meddling, that they managed to break into the base as well.
As orcs do, they just randomly stumbled upon a good old fight.
Yep. Although you guys did all notice that these orcs were particularly religious and not as as bloodthirsty as other orcs. They still put up a hell of a fight, but they had different obsession than just fighting, as did most of the population of the planet. So what happened next was you entered essentially one of the generator rooms, like one where an actual thermal generator was. Lava beneath you, over a small walkways that led to the generator itself. You were confronted by the hideous monstrosity that was Simeon, his mother, Simona, their cult magus, and Marin.
Yeah, that hit Magnus really, really hard, because Merrin was meant to have part of the God Emperor's soul in him, and he was turned. So for Magnus, that put mental strain on Magnus, which reared its ugly head later on.
Yeah. It's the same thing as what I essentially used this for that. It's the fact that if you've read some of the books, you know that at one point in one book, a Grey Knight got corrupted by a GC cult.
Yeah.
And that's where I very much thought, like, that must mean that the psychic or physical corruption, either way, is different from the way chaos corruption works. Chaos corruption is very much insidious. It tries to sneak in and then take you by surprise. The way a cult psychically dominates a person is like the psychic might of 1,000 individuals or more entering your mind, forcing your surrender. And not even a Grey Knight or an astropath can face down such direct might attempting to dominate them. And that's the scary thing about the hive mind. Nobody is free from its potential corruption. Which is, again, why Merrin got taken over. Because Merrin also got physically corrupted. Like, he got infected. And if you're physically infected, then your connection to the hive mind is so powerful that there's no way to escape anymore. Possibly the only exceptions to that rule would have been Magnus and the Emperor. They would have possibly had the psychic might to turn on the cult and take over the cult via that link, but I don't think any other man in the history of mankind in 40k would be able to resist a cult's influence at that point.
Yeah, definitely. When it's been put into the books, then it just gives the GM like, yeah, okay, this can be done. Brilliant. Let's do that.
Yeah. After a surprisingly easy fight, because Vidar and the Skitarii commander just wrecked house for a bit, you managed to defeat the cult. You came out again to face to face with the Orc war boss that was leading the entire attack, and he asked for only one thing: the sculpt he get. After which you discovered that the man you initially were after had been in the Genestealer headquarters this entire time, crafting more sculptures. And the orcs wanted this very gifted man to instead craft idols of Gork and Mork for them. The Orc war boss at the first sign of hostility also got promptly shot on the head by the assassin who'd been in the base the entire time as well, just waiting to take out any threat that possibly could threaten Magnus's life.
And Magnus did get very aggressive once an orc tried to deal with him. Magnus wasn't going to have that.
Yeah. And after the war boss died, the orcs were just kind of like, a boss just died. What do we do? Well, I say, I'm the boss now, and we're leaving. The orcs were like, yeah, we're not gonna mess with this, because all they saw was their boss's head just exploded. And they were like, nope, 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 nope. Orcs are normally very hard to break if their war boss is alive. If they see their war boss die, morale breaks surprisingly quickly amongst the orcs. Because there's nothing holding them together. The orcs on that planet are currently now also still all fighting each other to determine who the new war boss is going to be. Quite interesting. You've left the planet quite in a bit of turmoil, with the cleansing of all the gene stealers it needs, with all the gene stealers and the cultists that needs to be done. That just went completely fucking feral after you killed their master. Some very prominent figures just immediately leaving the planet, from all walks of society prominent figures, amongst which Aphelios Sephil, just all immediately abandoning the planet and getting the hell off. And of course the orcs bound struggle that just the planet was in rough shape after you were done with it, but it had not been subjected to exterminatus, which would have been the other solution. And I think this is a good time to take a small break, and then we can start discussing what's happened so far in season 2.
Yep, sure. We can take a 5-minute break, if that's good with you.
That's good for me.
Cool. So we'll be back in 5 minutes. Hello and welcome back. We are back from our short break, and we'll carry on with our story time, basically. So I believe we had just finished off. The orcs had basically been fighting over who would be the new war boss, and I think we were back on the ship.
Very much so the case, which is where the campaign wrap-up essentially started. For the first season, that is. Where both Sarah and Attila got given authority to actually become fully fledged citizens of battle. The interrogator told you all that you'd, for the moment, be on standby regarding any possible leads they would get on the escapees of the situation that you need to chase down. And several things happened, particularly with the character of Sergeant Kroon, which was the first time I'd actually let you hear one of his discussions. And the last sentence that was said by anyone in character in Season 1, "Welcome to the Brood."
But I also believe RNG gave Magnus a little tidbit, because Magnus had tried to keep his relations with the Rycones going, so he was getting some alone time with Miss Alona. And through RNGesus, Mr. Kroon came knocking at her door, which put Magnus on high alert of why is an inquisitorial agent looking for Miss Rycone. And I believe I said to him, like, why are you here? Did you want me?
Yeah.
And he was like,
Yeah.
oh yes, I wanted to speak to you.
Yeah, I think by the end of that, the one thing that actually, I think by the end in character, your main suspicion was that Alona was cheating on you.
I found, because Magnus is always on his microbead, if his team needs him, even if he's getting down and dirty, he'll stop immediately and go, and because his team's more important than getting his end away. And all the team members know this. Whenever they say it's Magnus transmitting on his microbead, yes, he's always transmitting if they need him. So it's like he'll always answer the cell phone, basically. And Sergeant Kroon knew that, and instead of microbeading him, he came to Miss Alona's door, which that was a moment that I wrote in my notes. That's very suspicious. But again, that was left up to RNG, because I believe we rolled a dice, and I think it was like if it was 0 to 10, Magnus was in the room at the time. So RNG wanted Magnus to get that little clue.
Yep. Most definitively. Well,
Did you want to call it there for the breakdown of season 1?
that's very much the end of Season 1, so yeah.
Okay, brilliant. So I've been here with Jay, our illustrious GM for the Dark Heresy series, and I hope you've all enjoyed our little catch-up, basically.
Yeah. We can go about discussing what's happened so far in Season 2, because that's what we starting off next week. So, as a follow-up from season 1, they got news that one of the pods that left the planet, one of the ships that had escaped, had been its warp route had been discovered, and the party was, well, their interrogator had chartered alone his ship again to bring the party to that location, seeing as the Rycones were already well, not so much Rycones, but Alona herself especially already was onto what was the actual cause, and instead of having to bring someone else in, it was considered more efficient and more secure to just have her bring the acolytes. So, after an unusually quick and hazardless warp travel, they arrived in a system that they're currently still in. To the planet that they would come to know. Well, I'm not even sure if in character you guys know the name, but the planet of Tuchalka. And I still find it ridiculous how many hints I was giving you. Just how much I was teasing you on Discord about the next yeah.
The shitstorm we were about to get into.
Yeah. I've teased you guys a lot about Season 2 before we started Season 2. Particular towards one character that they met. Season 2 so far has led them to discover that the world they are on is a demon world. A demon world being fought over by two forces of chaos, two gods of chaos, neither one giving the other one an inch, with followers of another god in a station above the planet, manufacturing and selling weapons of war, demon engines, all along that line, to whatever faction on the ground is willing to give them influence. But one of the most defining things that has happened so far in this campaign, in Season 2, is that House Rycone, or at least Alona, and Yenka had shown their true face, their true colours. Yenka attempted to spy on the rest of his party and was discovered. House Rycone immediately enacted a contingency protocol to arrest or capture, or if necessary kill, all members of the warband. They failed on the capturing part, and the party instead captured Sergeant Kroon and took him down with them to the planet. The only place they knew there were people that were also in service to the Inquisition, though trapped, but it would take them out of immediate danger. On the ship, they came to realize just how deep the rabbit hole went with House Rycone. They encountered both the assassin, as well as they saw one of the monstrosities created by House Rycone. A corpse of a genie sealer, modified with cybernetics to function as a combat servitor, a machine of war made from a Xenos corpse.
Yeah, something we were definitely not prepared for. And shortly after that, Magnus dumped his fiancée and gathered up the rest of the group. Along with two other members who we found on the planet. Because I believe Jay wasn't entirely sure that we would survive.
Well, also partially due to the fact that when you first crash down onto the planet, you were ambushed by demonic forces. And I am still sort of salty that you did not even take a scratch.
I've never seen rolls like that. I mean, I was fully prepared to be like, right, we're going to lose at least 3 people. This is not going to go well. And yet the rolls were just incredibly on our side.
Right. Yeah. I mean, how many things? I think you killed like 3 bloodletters and like 8 bloodhounds.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, take that into consideration, people. They killed 3 bloodletters and 8 bloodhounds. They're taking so much as a scratch. So yeah. That is most definitively something that happened. After which the demons actually just gave up. One of the bloodletters just threw down its sword and left with the bloodhounds. And they were for the first time confronted with the character they are now. Well, essentially they've got sort of dealing with him. A character by the name of Lumen. This character is a he claims to be an Inquisitor of the Ordo Malleus. He wears shining armor, an axe with a brazier in the middle of it that appears to be covered in purity seals and stuff like that. Splendid white hair, bit on the short side, but more of the silvery blonde white as opposed to just purely white. But also with 2 giant white wings. And his counterpart, or more or less the exact same person but at nighttime, Umbra, whose power armor is completely black, without accents even. His eyes are blood red shining, his hair entirely black, his axe almost as if it has faces on the blades that are screaming, and wings that look tattered and greyed. Who claims that he's working for a conclave of Inquisitors that have all been contacted by Lorgar to help free the son of the Emperor from the influence of the ruinous power, so that he may manifest himself again in service to the Imperium. And out of characters, all my players know this is an entirely just stupid plan to go along with this, but in character, well, in the lore, Lorgar has been placed as a martyr because he wrote Elictitio Divinitatis. In the lore, no Imperial citizen knows And the word bearers fell to chaos. And Lorgar fell to chaos and is the demon prince. And this little conclave of his is part of his plan. And now the party is currently trying to find a way to get off the planet, get word of House Reckholm's heretical activities out, possibly also get this world exterminated, or just at least the sector quarantined. And so far it looks like they most likely will need to seek aid of the demonic forces on the planet to be able to get out. Oh, and there's also a brute lord lurking around on the planet from the actual ship they were chasing to begin with. Because they were chasing the ship of Ophelius Phil, who was pregnant with a brute lord, who during warp travel gave birth and subsequently died. And the brute lord, with a small cult following, is currently also still on the planet, just going around murdering demons.
Yes, lots and lots of things that really want to kill us. Probably the worst place we could have ended up.
There are so many no's that lead out to new possible campaign options with this one. It's ridiculous. However, same as with Season 1 to Season 2, if we're going to do with Season 3, I want another break in between. That's very much the case, because I do not want to get GM burnout.
I personally, I don't know how the campaign will go, but I would like to retire Magnus at the end of this session, at the end of this season, just so that I can play a different character. I enjoy playing as Magnus, but at the same time, being a face means you end up doing a lot of the talking and you take a more of a front seat. And I would like to see some of the other characters take that role, just personally.
If anything, I'd very much would like you or somebody else to take over the campaign slot again on Tuesdays, and have me play again. Specifically Dark Heresy, because I haven't played Dark Heresy in a while. It's one of my favourite systems. It's also why the system is that I'm GMing. It's Dark Heresy currently at the moment. But just... yeah. Something that gives me enough character creation freedom to truly create a character that's my own. Like, with your current Warhammer Fantasy campaign that we're running on Thursdays, I've still made the character sort of my own, but just the fact that you can't start with the career choice that you like. A lot of things are predetermined for you. I find it a very restrictive system still.
Okay. I mean, I do actually have a Dark Heresy campaign already made, so it's very possible that I could GM 2 sessions a week. That wouldn't be a problem.
Yeah. Short campaign, at the very least. But yeah. Season 2 so far for Man and Monster. Quite literally more Man and Monster than even, well, Gene Stealers.
Yeah, we've had a lot of monsters in this campaign.
Yeah. Your party is in quite a precarious position because just the fact that you, without a scratch, survived your first encounter with demons ever has left some serious impressions on the denizens of this world.
I will add that when Magnus first saw the demon world, once he got off the ship's ramp and looked around, he lost his mind. He went completely catatonic. Right, I'm just gonna, yeah, I'm now a machine. until my
You,
mind can come back.
you didn't go catatonic, because
No,
catatonic
that
would
was
also
the
mean
wrong
you're not
word.
moving and shit. You just went essentially went into autopilot because you went entirely onto your subconscious instincts, and your entire consciousness was devoted to just chanting shit from the Lectitia Divinitatis that you just happened to remember. Because you did make a very bold claim to Lumen that you know the entire Lectitia Divinitatis.
Well, it's my class, and in the description of the class, it basically says that you're on the front line, repeating words from the Electro.
Yeah, because you're a Hierophant.
Yes.
I know. That means you know a lot of things about Lectitia Divinitatis. I am, however, gonna probably in the future make you roll for specific things about the Lectitia Divinitatis. But yeah. Is there much else to talk about?
I think that's pretty much where we should leave it off, because I don't want you giving up any tidbits to me.
Any possible future spoilers? No.
Yeah.
Are you gonna save this video or not?
Yes, this video will get uploaded to my YouTube channel, because YouTube's finally accepting Twitch videos now.
Excellent. And that means people might actually get more interested in this campaign, because you're currently in a very interesting situation.
Yeah, no, I've been doing a lot of thinking about the next episode and what needs to be done and what needs to be said. It's going to be an interesting one.
Yeah. Because still, you've not actually made full contact with both sides of the war on this planet. And as I said, they are very interested in you. Lumen said to you that they'd most likely be interested in you. For different reasons.
Oh, I don't like that. When demons take an interest, it's never good.
Yep.
But no, I think that's a good point to leave it, and hopefully everyone will come and join us next Tuesday, when we will see what happens with our group.
Yep. That seems appropriate way to end this.
Brilliant.
So with that, I say good day.
And thank you everyone for coming to the Dumbass class and listening to this this story time with us. And I hope to see you all next time. So take care everyone. Goodbye.